If you know me, you know that I love my coffee. And if you live in the United States, there's a good chance that you also like to guzzle some of that bean juice. I mean, have you seen the drive-through line at any Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts? It's a battleground over there. But today I want to ask you how ethical you think it is to get your coffee from point A to point B. Spoiler alert, it's not very ethical. And huge corporations are bullshitting you into thinking that everything is fine. Buckle up, because today we're chatting about the ethics of coffee. Okay, let me give you some context about why I wanted to talk about this topic in the first place. So a couple months ago, my husband and I went to our honeymoon in Bali, Indonesia. And one of the big things to do there was to drink luwak coffee. Now, if you don't know what a luwak is, it's kind of this like creepy, scary, kind of cute mongoose sort of creature. Now, they roam around on the jungle floor kind of searching for things to eat, right? And they come across usually some coffee beans. Obviously, they only eat the best coffee beans, and then of course they poop it out. Well, humans came along and they thought, I wonder what would happen if we roasted that and drank it. And that's exactly what we did. No, you don't just chuck the poop in boiling water and call it a day. First, they obviously wash off the poop and then they roast the beans that were fermented in the creature's tummy. And then you boil it and then you drink it. Now that's all fine and good if the luwak can kind of run around on the jungle floor and poop at his own delight, right? But what happens with the commercialization of this novelty? Now, I'm not without fault here. I drank the coffee. I didn't think until afterwards, hey, was that really even ethical? And I don't think it was. Now, I can't prove it, but the little luwak that I saw was kind of in a cage and he looked pretty lethargic. And, after I had drank the coffee and I saw him in his cage, I felt pretty bad about it. So this experience got me thinking, is any coffee ethical? Now, after making my history of tea video, I've been kind of peripherally aware of other human rights violations in the realm of like the coffee industry and the cocoa bean industry, but I really wanted to dive into it today. Now, I realized after a little bit of research that there's a lot of weird, muddy stuff going on in the realm of ethics in the coffee industry, and I kind of fell down a rabbit hole. There's a whole bunch of confusion behind like direct trade versus organic versus fair trade and all these different certifications. They seem to kind of mean nothing, but before I start spiraling out of control and become very unhinged, let me back up. Okay, let's talk about who is drinking the coffee here. The world's largest importers of coffee are the United States, France, and Germany. On the other hand, more than 90% of the coffee that is being exported from countries is coming from Brazil, Vietnam, Colombia, and Mexico. You'll notice most of the countries who are exporting these coffee beans are in the global south, and they're kind of in the middle of creating their infrastructures, building themselves up. Now, a lot of the countries that I just mentioned don't have a clear minimum wage, and whatever wages they do pay a lot of these workers don't really help sustain a household. In the history of coffee video, we sort of touched on some of the issues surrounding coffee bean farming, but let's get into it a little bit more here. See, when I was researching, I found that a lot of these farmers are making close to only $3.20 per day, and that's adjusted from their currency to fit the United States dollars. I'm going to be talking in terms of US dollars here today because I just need to do that to understand. I'm sorry, we don't use the metric system. 12 million of these coffee bean farmers fit the bill for living below the poverty line. And some of these folks are working to pay off their debts. Can you imagine like digging yourself out of a $10,000 debt hole with $3 a day? Let's do some girl math here, okay? How long do you think it would take you to pay that off? Let's say for funsies, there's no interest, okay? It would take you 9 years to do that, digging yourself out of a $10,000 debt hole with $3 a day. And there's interest on these payments, so it's like impossible to pay back, right? How is that fair? How is that cool? And it's not like you can just like hee hee ha ha kind of pick beans here and there. No, you have a quota. You have to fill up like a 100-pound box or crate or whatever per day. In particular, Brazil's coffee workers have it bad. And there's really little accountability from these huge corporations that are just unabashedly endorsing human rights violations. In my research for this video, I found that 2 corporations kind of sum up 40% of the world's coffee consumption. And those 2 brands are Jacobs Dow Egberts. I don't know who that is. I don't know if I said it right. I'm sorry. But also Nestle. Now, if you've seen my previous videos, you probably know that I have a little beef with Nestle, but their brands include Nescafe, Nespresso, Dolce Gusto, and Maxwell House, to name a few. And there was a 2016 expose that uncovered the horrendous conditions that a lot of these plantations in Brazil were trying to cover up. I mean, we're talking like slave-like conditions, forced child labor, inhumane levels of pesticide exposure. Like, why is no one talking about this? So this journal talked about how pesticide use is legal in Brazil to a larger degree than most other countries. So you can use a lot more harsh pesticides in Brazil rather than in like Europe. However, there's a reason why a lot of pesticides are banned in Europe and the United States, and it's because they can melt off your skin and they can kill you very easily. Even short-term exposure to these pesticides can cause a lot of damage and just instantly melt off your skin. No biggie. Let's say you work on one of these farms for a long time and you make it out alive. Yay. Great. You can still be at risk for a lot of different shit. Long-term exposure to a lot of these pesticides has been linked to Parkinson's-like symptoms and damage to reproductive organs. Not great. So one way or another, people who are working on these coffee plantations will probably be affected by the pesticides if they don't wear protective equipment. Now, you might be thinking, how hard can it be? Let's just put on your hazmat suit or whatever, right? It's not that easy. Let's embody ourselves and kind of transport ourselves to a different place. Imagine yourself working your ass off 12 hours a day in the 85 to 90 degree heat, just picking coffee beans, spraying pesticides. Who knows? Maybe that's all your job is, just spraying these pesticides. Do you really want to put on a freaking garbage bag over your entire body? You're going to be sweating buckets. It's probably real steamy in there. Also, it's not like your employer is going to give you the hazmat suit or whatever it is. Most workers are literally just handed a sprayer and told to go to town all day, every day. And that's what happened to Ronaldo Vicente Antonio. I hope I said that right. He was never given formal instructions or training on how to do his job with spraying the pesticides on the coffee crops. But he was pretty much told to do that all day, every day for about 10 years. Now, he had to wear his own rubber boots, and his employer gave him some dishwashing gloves and a paper hospital mask. Yeah, that's really gonna help you protect your skin from melting off. I don't know how much good it did, because Ronaldo said that he would have to take his gloves off and then manually unclog the pesticide sprayer thing, because the pesticides would clog up the little spray holes eventually. So it's probably safe to say that he's just rolling around in the pesticides and not having as much protection as he probably should have. And remember, I said that happened for 10 years. After 10 years of hard labor, he has lost the ability to walk without a cane, and he's also lost the dexterity in his fingers, so it's hard for him to button his shirt, it's hard for him to pick up small objects. And that really causes a lot of damage in someone's everyday life. Like, if you can't button your shirt, you gotta get help getting dressed, you might not be able to turn a doorknob, that kind of thing. And it's not even like he was given fair compensation for his work taking such a toll on his health. He and his wife live in a, quote, dilapidated house where the roof is sealed with black garbage bags to keep out the cold and rain, end quote. And I'm sure there's a lot more to Ronaldo's story, but unfortunately, the journalists didn't have enough time to really talk to him. But we don't even know how much he was paid. Let's switch gears and talk a little bit more about concrete wages so we can kind of get a better understanding of what's going on at these places. I think the journal that I was talking about laid it out really well. To cover the fundamental costs of a family of 4 in Brazil, they would need about $810 per month. Now, this journal interviewed a single mother of 3, so a family of 4, and she was able to make about $285 per month working on weekdays at her normal job on a plantation and picking up weekend shifts at a separate location. Like, bro, what the hell? She can't even make half of what she needs to support her family. And on top of that, plantation owners are just absolutely taking advantage of these folks. So here's one thing that I had noticed in a lot of my research is that plantation owners will fuck with the migrant workers the most. So let's say it's coffee bean harvesting season. They'll hire some extra help. Cool. Coffee plantation owners will be like, hey, fill up this box. So let's say you're supposed to get paid $2 per 60-liter bin. We'll say the owners take a little box like this that has handles on the sides, right? They'll cover up the handles and be like, hey, now fill it to the brim. Well, how much is that extra amount that is between the handles and the rim of the box? Probably a fair amount based off of this picture. Either way, the worker will fill up the box and then the plantation owner will just pay out the $2. So they're totally skimping them out on some money. And then, of course, when no one's looking, you just scoop up the top stuff between the rim and the handles, and then you put it in a new box. Boom, free profit, right? Fuck that, dude. And that's not the only thing either. Like, you might be thinking, what, Brazil doesn't have any of these laws or anything? Well, there are laws in place, but these are just illegal activities going on. So like a lot of these workers are seasonal migrant workers that come down to the plantations for work. And they don't really know how to read and write, you know? So it's like extra easy for plantation owners to just take advantage of them. And it's like so fucked up because they're supposed to get sick pay and vacation pay and overtime pay. But like that doesn't happen at all. They're just paid by the crate. And it's also really shitty because, like, if these workers try to speak up, they get punished. So there was one guy named Jorge, and he used to work on a coffee plantation in his area in Brazil when he was a kid and kind of when he was younger. But then he went to school and he started working for this nonprofit organization that went around and spoke to migrant workers about their rights on these plantations. Well, he got his education and he was like, hey, I'm going to go pay my old plantation that I worked at a visit because it was kind of shitty when I worked there when I was younger. And lo and behold, it was pretty shitty still. So he was like, you know what? There's a lot of illegal shit going on. I'm going to file a police report. He goes to the police station and one of the police officers was friends with the plantation owner. So he threatened Jorge to not file a police report. Jorge was like, fuck you, I'm doing it anyway. But he got hit with a lawsuit. He knew that the lawsuit would fall through because, you know, it's against the law to do all this shit. But they were just trying to apply pressure to him to make him, you know, drop the lawsuit. Eventually, everything passed and, you know, he won his court battle and all that. But it took years. And he knows how to read and write. Like, it's his job to know about this stuff, and it's his job to know about those laws. What about for people who don't know how to read and write? What about for people who don't have an education or who are just like, I don't want to live like this, but I guess I have to because otherwise I'm going to get sued like Jorge. Like I said, Jorge was a part of this organization that educated people on their rights, but it's still not enough to get a lot of these workers to speak up for themselves. Most of these workers don't want to rock the boat for a multitude of reasons, like whether it be because of their immigration status or that they just don't want to get in trouble with some of their community members, but it's just really fucked up that they can't speak up and be paid fairly or given any kind of benefits. And let's explore another thing that is pretty fucked up about a lot of these plantations. Another thing a lot of these plantations are guilty of is luring people into debt bondage. Let's talk about that, shall we? Unfortunately, debt bondage is an easy trap for a lot of these migrant workers to fall into. Like I mentioned, a lot of these folks don't know how to read or write, so they don't really know the laws or their rights too well. And so they're like, well, I have a limited amount of things I can do for work. And when a gato comes into their neighborhood, they think, hey, I'm down on my luck right now. Let me go work on this farm for a little while, get some cash, and then I'll come home and my family will be really happy. Yay. Well, No, because they're basically trafficked. Transported away from their families, forced to work like 12-hour days with little or no pay. That's called slavery, my friend. So they get there and they don't really have any money for food. That's okay. The Gato's got your back, but you gotta pay him back by working. And you don't have a place to stay. That's okay. The Gato's got you. But you're gonna have to work to pay him back. You see what I mean? So eventually these workers just kind of fall into a deeper and deeper and deeper debt hole just by things that they need, like food, water, shelter, And eventually they just fall into a debt spiral until the authorities are forced to save them. And that's something that's also so scary and sad to me, is that it's not just adults that are being forced into these conditions. It's also children. Brazil does have child labor laws, but again, all of this stuff is being done illegally, so until the feds come and bust the plantations, nobody's saying shit. So can you imagine yourself, or like your teenage kid or something, going for a summer job, let's say, and then basically being just forced to work long hours, no pay? Again, that's slavery. Okay, I know we kind of just fell down a Brazil-shaped rabbit hole there, but I promise there was a reason. For one, Brazil is the largest exporter of coffee beans in the entire world. So I think it's safe to say if a good amount of the coffee plantations in Brazil are having some weird fucked up shit happening, that it's a problem. And the other thing is that Nestle owns a lot of plantations in Brazil. Who has a reputation for being a sketchy, fucked up, kind of greedy corporation? I'll give you one guess. Now, in recent years, it seems like Nestle has kind of become aware that Gen Z is like not totally in love with them. And this has led to them trying, keyword trying, to save face. And my friend, this is where we fall into a Nestle-shaped rabbit hole, okay? Would you like to cross over to the dark roasted side with me? Ugh, I'm so lame. Please don't unsubscribe. So, as with the tea industry, there are lots of nonprofit organizations trying to make coffee a sustainable agricultural product, blah blah blah, human rights, wonderful, yay, sunshine and rainbows. Great message. So I checked out one of the sites of a nonprofit organization that a lot of people seem to be on a really good page about. That they thought, hey, this seems like a really trustworthy organization. And that organization is the Sustainable Coffee Challenge. I don't know how much I agree with the sentiment that they're trustworthy. Their aim is to make coffee the world's first sustainable agricultural product. Cool. Still okay, I guess. However, my problem is that organizations like this are encouraging corporations to hold themselves to a higher standard and pledge more in the efforts of sustainability. But there's no enforcement. I guess the thought from this nonprofit organization is that since 50% of coffee farmland will be destroyed by 2050, a lot of these coffee corporations and brands need to step it up and make sure that they are encouraging sustainability on their own part and hold each other accountable, which is great in practice, but I don't think that's realistic. What the SEC framework does not offer is auditing or certification. The vice president says, "We are not the police. You actually are policing yourselves. If you can show that your initiatives are contributing to those outcomes, that's great." That's great? Dude, you're giving these corporations a platform to greenwash themselves and then sell more stuff to consumers that is not necessarily doing any better for the planet, or for people, or for animals. In some ways, I would say the Sustainable Coffee Challenge is great because it is kind of pushing corporations to learn from their peers and be better for each other. But I just don't really think that's realistic because there's no incentives to do so right now. I don't think that future money and future revenue is a tempting enough reward for these corporations. Let me tell you why. So a quick Google search tells you that Nestle's CEO makes about $11 million every year and is worth about $30 billion overall. This guy's 58, okay? By 2050, he'll be 85. He made all the money that he needs to make by that point. Who fucking cares if the planet is gonna burn, right? It's not gonna matter to him if pigs fly at that point. He doesn't give a fuck because he's probably gonna die. He got his cash and he got out. Call me a pessimist, but I really believe that corporations will make real changes when there are laws put into place or there are FDA regulations or whatever you want to say. But once there's an actually strict governing entity that is like, no, you need to do this shit, then they'll kick themselves into gear. Okay, so you get it. Corporations, bad. Capitalism, bad. Nestle, bad. But what do you do about it? Drink from these fair trade, sustainable, organic, direct trade places? Well, that's another tricky subject that we're gonna dive into. Because it really feels like all of those things are just buzzwords, right? How do you know if one thing is going to help people not be in conditions analogous to slave labor? And how do you know if you're just gonna have something that doesn't have as much pesticides in it? Well, that's why I'm here. That's my job. In my video about the history of the tea trade, I kind of naively pointed out a lot of brands that I thought were ethical, but you know, the truth is not always so black and white. And I feel like with coffee, there's even larger of a gray area here. Because there doesn't really seem to be a gold standard in the sense of, hey, here's some kind of certification where you have good ethically sourced coffee that does not have pesticides and is, just good for the planet overall. It really feels like you kind of have to pick and choose what is most important to you. And you as the consumer might be wondering, well, how different can these certifications be, right? And that's sort of what I'm still confused about. I'm still not totally sure if I have all of this stuff correct, so if I make a mistake, I apologize and let me know in the comments for sure. But my hope is that I can lay out some stuff so that you can know which coffee equals good. So let's talk about some certifications. I know it's hard for people to discern between all of these different types of things, so let me break it down for you. First, we need to talk about the coffee making process so that you can understand what some of these words mean. Let's do that. So the first step in coffee cultivation is like the farming step, right? Farmer plants and grows and cultivates a plant, and then eventually they'll harvest the bean. They go through rounds of sorting and everything before they get packaged up, and then all of those beans get shipped to a roaster. And of course there they get roasted. Boom, roasted. The beans are then packaged up and sold to supermarkets or consumers where they consume them. All right, so the first word that people see a lot is direct trade. Now this means that the roaster has directly bought from the farmer, because sometimes between the whole farming and cultivating step and the roasting step, there can be a middleman in there. That middleman kind of skims some of the profit from the farmer. So the direct trade really just helps smaller farmers to be sure that they can make a good business relationship between a roaster, and they can hopefully have good business relations for years to come and work together for a longer time. Next, we have fair trade. Fair Trade USA is a nonprofit organization which labels consumer goods according to ethical standards. So that means that farmers who made a fair trade certified bag of coffee are being paid a livable wage. So, for example, let's say that the livable wage in Sri Lanka is about 120 United States dollars per month. A fair trade coffee brand would pay their workers that livable wage for their coffee. And the coffee plantation would undergo audits internally to make sure that they're up to those standards, right? If they don't meet the expectations, they can lose their fair trade certification. However, this can get a little sticky. Side note, I'm sorry that it's like getting dark in here. It's getting a lot darker, a lot quicker where I live, so I will have to invest in a ring light. So it would be way too much work for Fair Trade USA to have to go everywhere and make sure that everyone's being paid a livable wage. So they just pay out the livable wages to their co-ops, and then the co-ops are responsible for dispersing the money to each individual worker. And this is where it's kind of opened up for some kind of uncool behavior, right? Because the people in charge of the co-ops might be skimming money off the top. They might be withholding wages. We don't really know. So it's not a perfect system. Next, let's talk about organic coffee. So a USDA organic logo is on any coffee that is not using prohibited pesticides, herbicides, fertilizers, and the like for at least 3 years. There's really not any standard for like human rights in this certification. However, if you're more interested on if like synthetic products are making their way into your food, this might be a good type of coffee for you to buy. So those are really the only certifications I could find with clear criteria on like and individuals who come to farms and run audits and stuff. Other groups like the Rainforest Alliance do not have clear scores or criteria a farm needs to meet in order to become certified. So those seem more like a pay your way in kind of thing, allegedly. Now, my hope for today's video is not that you feel really bad about everything and try to stop drinking coffee altogether. Like, I don't know, maybe that would be good. I don't know. I know I'm being a downer today, but I don't want to stop drinking coffee. My hope is not that you will like feel really bad about drinking coffee and then stop trying to drink it. But I hope that you're more informed about your decision on what types of coffee you're drinking so that you're not walking into the grocery store and seeing all these different certifications on all these different bags of coffee and then feeling really overwhelmed, right? And I also don't want you to feel like you need to be pushed to buy outside of your means. I know a lot of these certifications come with an extra added cost, and if that's not realistic for you, don't do it. But perhaps if you have the capabilities, if you now have the know-how and you feel so inclined, maybe you could be a little bit more thoughtful on what kinds of coffee you're consuming. I think that's something I will try to do in the future now. I'm sorry if that was just like a really long, unhinged tirade of gibberish, but if you made it to this point in the video, thank you. I really appreciate it, and I'm glad you're here. But that is all I have for you on the ethics of coffee. Let me know how you liked this video. If you want me to talk about something else and you want to drop it down in the comments, let me know. And if I got something wrong, which I probably did, please let me know. I would love to make a correction. But I hope I gave you more information on how to make a better informed decision on your next cup of coffee. I'll catch you in the next one. Bye!